Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. When I was in high school, I worked for the city in one of the public libraries. There were several of us high school students there. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, the library was open later, so we had a lunch break those nights. One of those nights, my friend brought her ouija board to work. There were 4 of us teens. 3 of us participated. Stephen chickened out, but he stayed to watch. The spirit told us her name. We asked multiple questions about whether she was a demon or a ghost. She told us she had died in a car wreck. She gave us some details about her life, like playing basketball in high school, how she was killed, etc. We kind of played it off. When our lunch was over, one of the ladies who worked at the circulation desk asked us about our lunch. I told her that we were playing with a ouija board and recounted the spirit we had been talking to. I mentioned the spirit's name. I don't remember the name now, this was nearly 30 years ago. But Abby went white. She started to shake and sweat. Turns out she grew up with the spirit. Abby went to high school with her. She was supposed to be in the car the night that the spirit was killed. There were 4 girls in the car, 3 were decapitated. The other was ejected from the car and died on the side of the road. I decided to do some research on microfiche. I found the newspaper article about the accident, which cemented my belief that we had made a connection. Could my coworkers have been messing with me? Yes. I don't believe it, though, due to Abby's reaction. It screamed genuine to me. I haven't touched a ouija board since. This all started back when I was in middle school. I was young, curious, and seriously interested in the paranormal. Growing up in a religious home, I didn't have much experience with the occult, but that just fueled my curiosity. One day, my friends and I decided to experiment with a ouija board. We thought it would be fun, and, at first, nothing seemed to happen. But then the planchette started to move. We asked all the usual questions, like, "Who's there?" or "Is anyone here?" It moved slowly and steadily. At the time, I was sure one of my friends was just messing with me. Spooked, we threw the board out, but that wasn't the end. Soon after, I started having strange, vivid nightmares. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. almost every night or sometimes couldn't sleep at all. It was like I was in a fog, stumbling through my days as a complete zombie. One evening, while I was home alone and on FaceTime with a friend, I suddenly heard my mom call my name. I yelled back, but got no response. Then my friend reminded me that I was home alone. We both heard the voice, there was no explanation. After that, I continued hearing voices and knocks, and I still couldn't sleep. One evening, while doing homework in my room, I felt a sharp tug on my hair. My head yanked back so hard, I thought I'd pulled it myself, but I was alone. I ran to my dad, but he didn't really believe me. It wasn't until my brother started noticing strange things that it got truly unnerving. One day, he and I were in my room. I left to use the bathroom, and when I returned, he looked completely white-faced. He claimed he'd seen a little girl run past my bedroom door. I reminded him that we didn't have any other siblings, and I was in the bathroom connected to my room. Another time, I was on FaceTime with a different friend, walking into my bathroom, when she suddenly asked, "What's that behind you?" Right as she said it, the lights went out. I ran straight to my brother's room, but no one else believed me. The most terrifying experience happened one night when I woke up around 3 a.m., completely paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move, and in the corner of my room was a figure cloaked in black. It had no eyes, but I could feel its gaze fixed on me. The figure started floating towards me, then pressed down on my chest with an immense weight. I was utterly frozen, silently crying, until I finally managed to whisper, "Jesus." In an instant, it fled through my door and was gone. After that, I told my mom everything. She saw how scared I was and finally believed me. She blessed me and the house, and ever since then, nothing like that has happened. I no longer live in that home, but those experiences have left a lasting impact. Tonight was my first time using a Ouija board. My friend had one, so we began playing pretty casually. But once we took it more seriously and turned off the lights, things got terrifying. There were 4 of us playing and 2 observing. At first, we asked basic questions, and then we asked one observer and the board's owner for advice on how to play so we wouldn't get haunted. As we got deeper into it, we began asking more serious questions. Were you killed? The answer came instantly, yes. Are you a boy? Another, yes. Who are you? This one took a bit longer. Finally, it spelled out a name, William Devon. Amid a mix of screams and "stop moving it," one of the observers suggested looking up the name. That's when we found out that William Devon Howell is the name of a serial killer who is still alive. We started freaking out. We asked a few more questions, though, and received responses and numbers that seemed strange, but later turned out to have meaning for us. Then someone asked, "Did William murder you?" The answer came quickly, yes. Who are you? The board spelled Janice. Our friend checked her phone and found that a Janice Wright was indeed one of Howell's victims. We asked if they were a boy or girl, and it spelled girl. That confused us until we read more and discovered Janice was transgender. At that point, the reality of it all really started to set in, and the fear was overwhelming. The last significant response we got was when we asked for the names of other victims. The board spelled out Mary. We checked, and Mary was also one of Howell's victims. Then our friend with the phone suggested we ask the board what month the victims went missing. When we asked, it said October. And sure enough, it was October. By that point, we were beyond scared and decided to say goodbye. The whole session lasted about 45 minutes. This was my first interaction with a Ouija board and anything paranormal. Is this kind of activity normal with Ouija boards? And has anyone ever connected with victims of someone like William Devon Howell? Today, I've mustered up the courage to share my own story, one I've kept buried under memories of teenage rebellion and my goth phase. It's about the time my best friend and I, draped in too much black and a false sense of invincibility, took a Ouija board to a cemetery. This was back in high school, when being goth wasn't just about fashion, but embracing an entire aesthetic. My best friend and I were inseparable. Let's call her Leela. We both had a fascination with the afterlife, and eventually, we got our hands on a Ouija board. It was a battered thing from a garage sale that seemed to whisper promises of real connections with spirits. And where else would a pair of self-declared goth teens go for an authentic seance but a cemetery? So, under the veil of night, we trespassed into the land of the dead. We settled among the ancient graves, worn by time and neglect, and found a suitable place nestled between 2 headstones. After lighting some candles and checking the area to make sure no one was around, we started the session. Our questions began innocently enough, like asking if anyone was present. We half expected nothing to come of it. But our giggles died down as the planchette shivered under our fingers and slid purposefully to yes. "What's your name?" Leela asked, her voice a mix of thrill and unease. Slowly, the planchette moved to spell, GRACE. The air around us thickened, and what had been an eerily beautiful cemetery in the moonlight suddenly felt menacing. Feeling bold, we pressed on. "Grace, did you die near here?" The answer came as a swift, chilling yes. Looking back, I know I should have felt unsettled enough to stop there. But we didn't. This was exactly the kind of experience we'd wanted. A cold wind whipped through the cemetery, rustling the trees as if they were sharing secrets with the dead beneath them. Our candles flickered desperately in the dark, and Leela laughed, but it was edged with hysteria. Then, without warning, Leela's demeanor changed. Her hand on the planchette turned ice cold, and her eyes went blank, reflecting the moon. The planchette suddenly flew from under our touch, as if pulled by an invisible force. An ear-shattering scream filled the night, Leela's voice sounding like a chorus of anguished cries. We bolted, leaving behind the board and the candles, fleeing from shadows that seemed to chase us. Only later, back in Leela's room, did we notice the scratches on her arm, thin, precise lines as if made by a needle, spelling a single word, stay. The following weeks blurred into sleepless nights. Leela withdrew, plagued by night terrors and a shadow that seemed constantly within reach. Her goth attire shifted to sweaters and jeans, as though brighter colors could fend off the darkness. We never spoke of it to anyone. Eventually, life returned to a semblance of normal. The scratches faded into pale lines, and the memories turned into uneasy dreams. But I still carry questions with me. Who was Grace? Were we responsible for disturbing her, and for Leela's torment? How many others, like us, find themselves haunted by an encounter they can't explain? Has anyone else experienced something like this? And how do you make peace with a past that leaves such a haunting imprint? One day, my partner got the idea to buy a Ouija board and use it with a few friends. I wouldn't say we were complete skeptics, but I don't think any of us were really expecting anything wild to happen. We looked up how to safely use one and planned out what kind of questions to ask. We didn't want to use it at our house, so we gathered a couple of friends and drove to a state park a few towns over. We headed up the hiking trail and found a good spot to lay the board down. We started asking if there was a spirit who wanted to communicate, etc., and the planchette moved with ease. It's a strange, powerful feeling when it glides across the board, especially since the planchette was a thick piece of plastic with noticeable friction when we tried moving it intentionally. We were a bit stunned that the thing was working. We asked the spirit if it was a good spirit. The planchette moved to no. We then asked if it wanted to harm us, and it moved to yes. My partner asked how it would go about doing this, and the board spelled out ENGINE. Just then, a group of hikers came up in our direction, and we carelessly put the board away without properly saying goodbye. We hiked back down to another secluded area and decided to try again. This time, we connected with a spirit claiming to be a 6-year-old boy who had died in the 1800s. It seemed harmless at first until it told one of our friends that it wanted him to die, so it would have someone to play with. We decided to test it by asking questions only we would know the answers to. Each person asking the question took their hands off the planchette. The board got every question correct, and that's when I started to feel uneasy. The board then spelled out my name. I wasn't sure why, but I brushed it off. Soon after, it began to rain, so we told the board we had to go and asked it to help us bring the planchette down to goodbye. It complied. As we walked back to my car, I noticed a woman sitting in an SUV next to mine, watching us. Her gaze never left us, and it rubbed me the wrong way. We got into my car, but when I tried to start it, the engine didn't turn over. It felt like the battery was dead, though my accessories still worked. I looked over at the woman, put down my window, and asked if she had jumper cables. She reached behind her and pulled them out as if they were ready. We got out, hooked up the cables, and just then, my partner's friend's phone rang from an unknown number. When he answered, it was someone just asking if we were okay. He figured it was probably a misdial from his number's previous owner, who was apparently a dealer. Strange. We chatted with the woman, thanked her for helping us, and learned she had the same name as me, the one the board had spelled out. She told us she worked as an ultrasound technician at a local hospital and had cancer and young children. When I asked why she was in the parking lot, she said she was waiting for her weed dealer, as medical marijuana is legal in my state. I was grateful for her help, even though it felt odd. I tried starting my car again, but it still didn't work, and it just rolled a few feet before shutting off. As it got dark, I realized I'd need to call a tow truck. Our friends got picked up, and my partner stayed with me as we waited. We told the woman she could leave, but she weirdly stayed with us. She even offered for us to sit in her car while we waited because it was raining again. I asked if I could sit on her trunk ledge, but she said the trunk didn't open. Stupidly, we got into her car, and she made a joke about disabling her child safety locks so I wouldn't think she was trying to trap us. That rubbed me the wrong way. She suggested I just leave my car and offered to drive us home. I politely declined. She then told me she had a friend whose husband worked for VW and could fix my car for a good price. She called him, and because we were in her car, it was quiet enough that my partner and I could faintly hear the conversation. Her friend asked if I was a boy or a girl, and when she said girl, he simply replied, "Good." That was enough for me. We got out of the car, thanked her for her help, and told her the tow truck would be there soon. We even gave her the Ouija board, saying she could keep it because we didn't want it anymore. She kept trying to get my phone number and insisted she would go with me to her friend for the repair, but eventually, she left. I finally got home late that night, and my partner showed me an unsent text on his phone. In a conversation with his mother, the text box had the words "Yes, Satan, yes" typed out. The message wasn't sent, and he was certain he didn't write it. The next day, I called the hospital to see if that woman actually worked there as she'd claimed. They transferred me to 2 different departments, and there was no ultrasound technician there with my name. I still don't know how to explain what happened that night, and I'm sure as hell never using a Ouija board again. Also, the woman's supposed dealer never even showed up. So, what she was really doing there and what her intentions were, I'll never know. This happened last summer. There were 4 of us in total. I'll keep the names anonymous for privacy. Driven by peak summer boredom and a touch of teenage stupidity, we dusted off an old Ouija board we found in one friend's attic. You know the drill. We expected some cheap thrills, a few scares to laugh off later. Well, it didn't exactly go as planned. We started off skeptical, tossing out questions, half expecting nothing to happen. But things escalated quickly. The planchette moved with a mind of its own, spelling out Remy when we asked for a name. I wish I could say we were just messing with each other, but the fear in everyone's eyes said otherwise. Now, here's where we screwed up big time. We didn't close the session. We didn't even think about it until it was too late. We just bolted when a freaky shadow appeared. And we've been on a downward spiral ever since. The worst part? One of our group, let's call her E, has been experiencing some pretty terrifying stuff, unexplained noises, shadows lurking in her peripheral vision, and even a vaguely human figure appearing in photos with her, just lurking in the background. It's wrong, and it's scaring the hell out of us. We're out of our depth here. Do we go back to the attic and try to say goodbye properly? Do we try to find a professional medium or something who can cleanse or, I don't know, do something to help us? Do genuine ones even exist? Whatever's happening, E is not herself. She's constantly on edge, jumping at shadows that seem to be getting more physical by the day. It's like this Remy is haunting her. But why? What does it want? I'm hoping some of you have had more experience with this stuff than a bunch of freaked out teens. We're truly at our wits' end, and any advice would help us more than you can imagine. We need to figure out how to fix this. How do you undo a Ouija mistake? Is she gonna be okay? This happened a couple of years back. It was a night like any other, or so we thought. The breeze was gentle, and the moon was shy behind the clouds, almost as if it were instinctively hiding from whatever was to come. 4 of us sat in the dimly lit room of my college dorm, surrounded by textbooks and takeaway containers, a normal setting that was about to witness something entirely abnormal. We were all skeptics, mind you. The Ouija board, an old, dusty thing belonging to Sarah's grandmother, was meant to be a joke, a break from the relentless pressure of midterms. As soon as the lights dimmed, though, an unsettling chill settled in the room that no amount of laughter could dispel. Who wants to go first? Max asked, the flicker of hesitation in his eyes, betraying his nonchalant tone. I will, I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. My fingers settled on the planchette alongside Sarah's, both of us half expecting it to move on its own, though it obediently stayed put. "Is anyone here with us?" Sarah whispered. "Nothing." "Come on, spirit, don't be shy," Max joked, his smirk fading as the minutes ticked by in silence. Finally, the planchette moved, a slow, deliberate inch toward yes. Sarah's eyes met mine, wide with a blend of excitement and fear. Maybe it was just her, moving it for effect, I thought. But then, why did my own hands feel like they were being guided by an unseen force? "Who are you?" I asked the void that seemed to press in on us. The planchette began to spell out, "David, are you a good spirit, David?" Sarah's voice trembled. The planchette didn't move for a second, and then, slowly, it moved toward no. The laugh that bubbled up from my chest sounded hollow, even to my own ears. This must be some kind of joke, right? When the room temperature dropped, we blamed the drafty window. When the candles flickered, we called it a coincidence. But when a distant whisper seemed to echo from the corners of the room, even Max's skepticism faltered, a whisper that seemed to say, "Leave." "Okay, if you're really here, give us a sign," I said, half desperate for something to chalk up to my imagination. That's when it happened. A loud thump came from the hallway outside. The door to the room slammed shut. It must be the wind, my mind screamed. But how? The windows were closed. The planchette was moving again, more forcefully this time, as if whatever was communicating with us was growing impatient. "Leave," it spelled out again. Panic was setting in, our breaths coming out in visible puffs, despite it being late summer. We wanted to stop, to say goodbye on the board and end the session, but Sarah's hands seemed glued to the planchette. "It's just a game, right?" Jack murmured, though it sounded more like he was trying to convince himself than any of us. Suddenly, Sarah's face contorted in a silent scream. Her eyes rolled back. The planchette skittered across the board under her fingers, spelling out an ominous message, "NOW." In an instant, we were on our feet, trying to peel Sarah's fingers from the planchette, which now seemed fused to the board. Sarah's voice, when it came, didn't sound like her own. It was deeper, angrier. "You can't leave," she growled, and not a single one of us believed any longer that it was Sarah speaking. It took all three of us to pull her away. The planchette suddenly released its grip, clattering onto the floor. Sarah blinked, confusion washing over her face as she returned to herself. "We have to close the session properly," I insisted, not wanting to entertain the thought of leaving it open, inviting anything else into our space. With trembling hands, we moved the planchette to goodbye, holding our breath until it hit the mark. Only then did Sarah collapse, as if whatever had held her upright had vanished. We didn't sleep that night. We didn't dare. We recounted every moment, trying to find logical explanations for what had happened, but failing to convince even ourselves. As the sun rose the next morning, it brought no comfort, no reassurance. We had touched something beyond our understanding, and the fear of summoning it again kept our skepticism firmly at bay. The Ouija board was burned that morning, reduced to ashes in a desperate attempt to sever whatever connection we had unwittingly established. But even as we watched it smolder, we couldn't shake the feeling that what transpired that night would linger, an unseen mark etched deep within us. Our friendship survived, somewhat. We speak less of college stress now, and more of the whispering chill we feel when the world grows quiet. There are questions we no longer dare to ask, because some answers, we have come to realize, are better left alone. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.